Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining today, and we are excited to kick off our spring webinar series this year, and we have many more to come in the next 2 months. So I hope you are able to join us for those as well. I'd like to introduce to you today our guest speaker, Francisco Valenzuela. He has served as the Director of Government Affairs and Community Relations for the San Andres Regional Center for the past 25 years. The San Andres Regional Center is a community-based private nonprofit that serves over 19,000 families in the countries of San Clara, Santa Cruz, San Bento, and Monterey. It is one of the 21 regional centers throughout the state of California, funded by the Department of Developmental Services as required by the Lanterman Developmental Disabilities Act. He meets regularly with local, state, and national elected officials and their staff on pending policy, bills, and budget issues that could impact developmental disability community. He is responsible for organizing the San Andrews Regional Center's annual legislative luncheon and annual Service Above Self Awards dinner. Prior to San Andreas, worked as the congressional aide to Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren at her district office. He completed a BS and some graduate coursework at San Jose State University. He is a lifelong advocate and supporter of programs serving at-risk youth, social, cultural, and economically disadvantaged communities, domestic violence victims, disability groups, cancer organizations, and after-school programs. Without further ado, our guest speaker, Francisco Valenzuela.
Hi, Dylan. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you to TASH for the opportunity to speak during this webinar series. It's truly an honor to be given the opportunity to share some thoughts. And thank you to the guests who are going to be online or going to be joining us. I truly appreciate that you taking the time to hear what I have to share. I'm pretty sure everyone that's going to be online has probably participated, if not in legislative advocacy. My approach really is probably like just everyone else's. You're meeting with elected officials, sharing your stories, and then hopefully with that comes results. But what I do is I actually go into the roots of legislative advocacy and really how to prepare for a meeting. You know, what you should and shouldn't do in going into a meeting. And really, whether people agree with this or not, you know, really take a nonpartisan approach. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a bunch of slides. I might go a little fast during the beginning before I get into the roots of actually how to go into a meeting. I'm going to share about the work that I do, the area that I do it in California, and hopefully that can relate to others that might be joining us from other parts of the country. Talking to a legislator is the same no matter if you're from Washington or California or Vermont. You know, it's all the same. It's just a matter of how they listen to you, and hopefully your concerns are met. With that said, let me go into the first. As I mentioned, you know, if possible, legislative advocacy should be nonpartisan, regardless of party affiliation, social economic background, or where someone lives. Disability issues impact everyone. As you know, there are legislators, no matter how they vote, what party they're affiliated with, they either have a loved one or know someone with a disability. And so really, when you're meeting with elected officials, the approach should be based on the needs of those individuals as opposed to which party that legislator is affiliated with. If possible, conversations should be, you know, not about politics. The last thing you want to do is go into a legislator's office, whether it's someone that you support or not, and start talking politics. Your purpose of being in that meeting is just to talk about the issues that you have. because regardless if it's a Republican or Democrat or independent, they're going to vote on these issues. A child born with a disability or an individual who becomes disabled does not automatically become associated with the political party. And that's a fact. We have individuals that we serve whose parents are registered Republicans, registered Democrats, or registered independents or other parties. And for us, it doesn't matter. We serve everyone. And what happens for example, in our state, California, when it comes to serving individuals with developmental disabilities, it impacts everyone, regardless of how they're voting. Why do we need to advocate? And ironically, right now, as we all know, at the national level, there's proposed cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Veterans Affairs issues just came up, and these are all concerns that individuals rely on a daily to live their healthy life. What to do? At the federal level, obviously, you contact your senator, congress member, and voice your concerns. At the state level, you're contacting your state senators, assembly members, or however they're identified in your state. I'm going to go through a little history of legislative advocacy and where we got to today in a lot of these landmark legislative decisions that have impacted our community. The history of legislative advocacy, supporting individuals with disabilities, understanding the importance of ongoing communication with stakeholders in the community, the value of policy discussions with elected officials and their staff, bringing issues of concern to the community, and then grassroots advocacy, which is what I'm pretty sure all of you have done or doing now. What I hope to, what you all get out of this is the learning objective would be the importance of creating talking points for a meeting, setting up a legislative meeting, preparing for a legislative meetings, understanding the value of healthy public policy discussions. And I emphasize healthy because you want these legislators to welcome you back. Who should be part of legislative meetings? The importance of personal stories. I've been in hundreds of meetings with elected officials, and the stories of parents, individuals served, their care providers are the most powerful ones. I mean, when you hear from that person directly, how could you not be moved by the impacts of the services that they're receiving, or the impact of what's going to happen if those services are cut? And then last, helping legislators care about your issues and those you support. And again, it goes back to party politics, putting that aside and being nonpartisan when you're walking into a meeting. Back in the 60s, there was a lot of civil rights movement in regards to disability issues. President Kennedy had a family member who had a developmental disability. And really that was, from my understanding, in what I've researched, the beginning of the process of advocacy in supporting individuals with disabilities. The passage of key legislative decisions, landmark ones, there have been many, but I'm going to mention three. The Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm sure all of you know this. I don't need to read it, but that was a big decision. And a story that was written by Arlene Marison in the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund. She did a really great job in really detailing out how that whole movement became, how it began and how eventually ADA was passed. The full story is there with that link. I really recommend you all looking into that story when you have a chance. The Olmstead Act. Many of you, if not all of you, should know about the Olmstead Act. The case started when Louise Curtis and Elaine Wilson were diagnosed with a mental illness and developmental disabilities and were admitted to a psychiatric unit in Georgia Regional State Hospital. On June 22nd, 1999, the United States Supreme Court held an Olmstead versus LC that unjustified segregation of persons with disabilities constitutes discrimination in violation of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And again, this is all information you all know. There's a reason I'm bringing this up. And then the last one, for us in California, if you live in California, you're familiar with the Latterman Act. If you're not, I'm going to just do a quick brief history. How did the Latterman Act come about? Parents who wanted options other than state hospitals. Their legislative advocacy over 60 years ago began the process of what is now known as regional centers. I represent a regional center in California. Regional centers provide various services to individuals with developmental disabilities from birth to death. There is a video of the parents who were behind the development of our service system, and it's a video called "We Are Here to Speak for Justice." You can find that on YouTube. Basically, what their legislative advocacy did back in the day, over 60 years ago, created a system that we now call a regional center service system in California. If it were not for those parents, our system would not exist. And that's all because of the legislative work that advocacy work they did behind the scenes. In 1965, Bill 691 was signed by Governor Brown, authorizing the establishment of 2 pilot regional centers. They were to call to the attention of unmet needs, assist service development, upgrade services, maintain records, and provide systematic assessment, diagnosis, and follow-up. The centers were also to assist state hospitals in placement. At the time, as many of you know, there's state hospitals existed throughout the United States. In California, there was various state hospitals. In our own backyard, Agnews Developmental Center was one of the hospitals that was here. We're actually, San Andreas was part of the process group that was behind in the closure of Agnews Developmental Center and moving all those individuals out into the community. In 1966, 2 pilot regional centers were established, one at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles and the other at the Children of San Francisco. I know we don't use that word anymore, but I just wanted it for reference. In 1968, an assembly study reviewing the effectiveness of pilot regional centers presented a proposal to recognize California's fragmented system of services. The report concluded that the pilot regional centers were successful and should be expanded statewide. In 1969, Assemblymember Frank D. Latterman introduced AB 225 to extend the regional centers throughout the state of California. On September 4th, 1969, Governor Ronald Reagan signed the Latterman Act into law. He stated that California is currently preparing to implement the Latterman Mental Retardation Services Act. Now, the reason I bring all this up, the reason I'm bringing up this past history is if it were not for these parents who started over 60 years ago a movement in California, the regional center system would not exist. And quite possibly individuals that were living in state institutions could possibly still be living there or living at home, receiving little or no services. I'm going to pass through all this. In our system, just like in every other state, the funding comes through, whether it's state funded or federally funded or locally funded. For us, the money comes through the legislature, passed down to Health and Human Services, Developmental Services, and then regional centers. And there's a reason I'm bringing all this up in regards to the legislative advocacy work that we do and what I want to share. In California, we're serving over 450 individuals with a developmental disability from life to death. The current budget for the Department of Developmental Services is well over $18 billion in California. Over 450 individuals are served within the regional centers. There are a few state hospitals for individuals that have forensic issues, but the majority of them are in the process of either being closed or closed. In California, there are 40 senators and 80 assembly members representing 21 regional centers. And the reason I wanted to show you the map, and this will go into my presentation as I go forward, is because of the advocacy that takes place throughout the state of California for the same service system and the importance of having the message, a one voice message when it comes to legislative issues that impact our population. And whether you live in San Diego, Fresno, Shasta County, if there's individuals in those counties receiving services from a regional center, the goal really is to make sure that when advocates are out meeting with elected officials, that they have a common voice, a common concern, and a common message. And I'll go into that as I get to the second part of the presentation. San Andreas, we cover 4 counties. We're serving over 19,500 individuals in 4 counties. I personally deal with 12 elected officials here, 5 senators, 6, 7 senators. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is legislative advocacy should start not when an elected official becomes a state representative or a federal representative, but actually local representatives. For example, Senator Dave Cortese was a city council member for the city of San Jose. He was a board of supervisor of Santa Clara County, and then eventually became a state senator. Now, as a council member and a board of supervisor, he had no impact on our budget. However, when he became a state senator, now he had a direct impact on our budget. But at the point when he became a senator, he already knew us. We didn't have to educate him about our service system. We didn't have to educate him about who we were. He already knew us. But as he took in on new role, he became one of our biggest advocates because he already knew the concerns in the population that we served. Contrary to that, Senator Wahab, and this is for every state, this is for every county, this is for every city. You may have an elected official who's just elected. They're coming into your catchment area, they're coming into your district, and they may not know anything about an individual with a developmental disability. And so while we had Senator Cortese, who already knew us, became a senator, Senator Wahab was just on the opposite end of that. We literally had to, our constituency, our groups, our advocates had to meet with her to let her know, hey, look, this is who we are. These are the needs that we have and the services that we provide. And so you can have an extreme situation where someone's being elected in a district that has everything and knows everything about our service system, or an individual with a developmental disability, or someone's getting elected that has no clue about a person served with a developmental disability, or has never met a person with a developmental disability. And so really the grassroots advocacy of meeting with your elected officials are important. Senator Laird was an assembly member before he became a senator, and it worked out for us. For these, real quick, I'll go through these. Assembly member Ash Collar was a city council member. He became an assembly member. Great thing about that is he already knew us. So all we had to do is continue to educate him on the bills and budget issues that we were concerned with. With redistricting, we picked up a new seat, which came in 2 new elected officials, Don Addis and Gail Pellerine. So we literally had to educate these 2 elected officials about who we were, and the concerns that we had, or the supports that we needed. And then for us in California, Speaker Robert Rivas happens to be in our catchment area. If those of you who are from California know that he's one of the most powerful politicians in California, next to the governor, in deciding a lot of the direction that our state takes in legislative advocacy, which is, again, why you really want to meet with these elected officials and their staff as soon as you can. The reason I'm bringing your staff is at one time, Assembly member Patrick Aherns and Speaker Rivas were staffers. At one point they were staffers, and now they are in a position of voting on policies that impact our service system. And it's just a real quick correction, my apologies. It says Evan Lowe, that should be Patrick Aherns. Beginning the process of legislative advocacy, advocates should not wait for something to happen. Make it happen. I'm pretty sure all of you are advocates, and you don't wait for things to happen. You're out there making it, voicing your concerns, who should get involved, what the messages should be, when should communities take action, where should advocacy take place, and why you should get involved. These are all questions, and I'm pretty sure all of you have asked yourselves, or points that you've taken when you've done your legislative advocacy. Who, what, when, where, why, key points to legislative advocacy. Who parents, individuals served, family members, service providers, advocates who support the developmental disability community should get involved. What to do. Advocating requires messaging, relationship building, consensus, building that planning, organizing, and empowerment. When advocates should be prepared to take action and speak on behalf of the developmental disability community at a given moment. For example, right now at the federal level, we're experiencing all these proposed cuts to Medicare. These are times where people need to get involved. Again, regardless of the party affiliation, these are moments when groups should mobilize with a common voice, with one voice, and letting elected officials know what the concerns are. And then where should they take place? The legislative offices, visits, legislative hearings, and community events. I will focus on the second part of my presentation on actual legislative office visits. And then why? Because elected officials play an important role in creating policy that will impact the lives of the developmental disability community. I know in California, when we meet with our elected officials, the message is constant. And again, it's regardless if it's a Democrat or Republican or an independent, we're giving the same message. Make the commitment to get involved, community commitment, goals and priorities, commitment of resources. What would your community be like if you achieved your mission? How could policy affect change? Engage the community with open dialogue. Do your research to understand the needs of the community. Always work as a community coalition building with one voice. I always encourage people not to just drop into a legislative office and talk about what's on their mind. I always encourage people to go in as a group, go in with a consensus. And as a former staffer, I know what happens. You can go into an office, you could talk to a staffer, they'll take notes. And if it's not an issue that's pending, if it's not a bill that's pending, it may or may not even get to the ears of that elected official. Now, this is an important thing. I hope you all write this down. What are the 3 key factors to legislative advocacy? Building relationships, building relationships, building relationships. The effectiveness of your work, the effectiveness of advocates, parents, is building relationships, not just with elected officials, and not just with their staff, but with other stakeholders in the community. There are a lot of advocacy groups out there, the ARC, TASH, ARCA. Throughout the state, I'm pretty sure, throughout the country, there's other organizations. And even though different organizations have different missions, there are times when coalition building needs to happen with one voice. And right now, our nation, regardless of the party politics, regarding issues related to the disability community or seniors, should be speaking in one voice, as nonpartisan as possible. Building relationships in the community, get involved organizing disability community events, partner with other organizations to host a nonpartisan events, promote ability, empowerment, and inclusion at community events, invite the disability community and others to all events, invite local, state, federal elected officials to all community events, invite the media to community events. Here at San Andreas, I probably work at least 100 events a year. I've managed, planned, organized well over 600 events in the 25 years that I've been here. And one of the things that I always look for is coalition building. I've had events that were from 20 to 30 people to several thousand. And so for me, always engaging the community, inviting elected officials, inviting their staff is important because the community and elected officials get to see our community in a different light. For example, one of the events that we host in partnership with the City Hall, San Jose City Hall, is Disability Awareness Day. And we invite a wider range of organizations to be there. We have individuals with differing abilities as part of the entertainment. They are the entertainment. And the word empowerment and inclusion is always the underlining factor. And so we do these events to not bring a negative connotation to, oh, we're a community with disabilities and we need your help. No, we're a empowered community, and here are the abilities of these individuals that we serve. And when you're able to get elected officials to see that, they become more engaged and more invested in that community. Building relationships in the community with who? With other families, elected officials and their staff, key decision makers, community partners, stakeholders, with the media, social media, and advocacy groups. And again, it goes to reaching out to everyone in the community to bring them in. One of the events that I host, our 9th year is coming up, is our Superhero Summer Festival, where I have not just the services that are provided to our individuals, but general organizations, general services, nonprofit organizations. The Regional Center Service System has various services that are provided to individuals. And a lot of the programs that come out to table at our events are there sharing information, but I also reach out to generic resources because these families still need other services, not just the services that we provide, but they may need other services. And by bringing in non-disability programs to these events, now you're also educating that group of individuals, that population, that community about what our community is about. So you never want to exclude organizations from being part of a tabling event. You really want to be inclusive and really build that coalition of potential stakeholders in supporting individuals and families who have a loved one with a developmental disability. How do you do it? By organizing, educating, by voting, by taking action. Everyone should be registered to vote. We have individuals in our community that register to vote, regardless of their, party affiliation. We should always encourage people to get registered to vote. Know your representative. It's important to know your local, state, and federal elected officials. Knowing more about your elected official will help you be better prepared when doing legislative advocacy. Read the bios of elected officials before making office visits. Be sure to get the names and email addresses of legislative staff you will meet with for follow-up communication. Connecting with candidates during a campaign event is an effective way to establish a relationship with those running for office. I've met hundreds of individuals who were candidates and now, they're a city council member, a board of supervisor, school board member, state senator, state assembly member. And so the best time to start doing legislative advocacy is who's running for office, who's running for school board, who's running for city council. And even if you're in a situation where, oh, they're not going to impact my community, they can have an impact on your community. But building that relationship is really the key thing to always to do. It's common for residents not to know their elected officials, who their elected officials are. Campaigns are a good way to become acquainted with an elected official or candidate and their views during the election process. Many eligible voters don't even participate in the election process, which can leave them unaware as to who is running for office. Many eligible voters are disenfranchised by partisan politics, which is the truth. You don't have to go to a political rally. You don't have to go to a fundraiser and say, oh, I'm here to endorse that particular candidate. Just to go and hear what they have to say is okay. Even if you go to the other individuals' campaign, getting more information about the individual, having a direct conversation with those candidates is really important, because then you get to see where they're at, what are their priorities, and building that relationship from the beginning. When you're in your state capital, city council, board of supervisor, or even in Washington, D.C., testifying at hearings is the best way to do advocacy work. Traditionally, you might have a short time, but be prepared to give a quick testimony. At the county level, at the city level, there's a lot of times those municipalities are voting on policies or budget issues related to housing. or school issues. It's important to be there to testify, to say, hey, we support this, and do it in a respectful manner. Right now are some trying times. I know there's people that are angry, but the best way to really express yourself and express your concern is in a very calm way. There's moments where we have to beat down a door and yell and scream, and if an elected official is completely doing something illegal or wrong, and yes, we want to make sure that we voice those concerns. But to the most part, speaking um, in a calm voice, expressing your concerns with emotion is really my approach, as opposed to what others may advise you on doing. I've been in presentations where someone said you need to, yell, 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 yell. I personally, I don't agree with that approach. I believe in developing a relationship and having a healthy dialogue with those elected officials. Testifying at a hearing, ways to communicate with an elected official. Meeting with an elected official is the most effective way to communicate your concerns, and ways to communicate: phone calls, express your concerns, set up office visits, writing letters, sharing personal stories and photos of loved ones. We do know that a lot of elected officials, families don't live near their district offices. Write a letter, send a photo of your loved one, let them know, hey, this is what my concerns are, and here's a photo of my son, my daughter, my mom, my dad, so that they can see a face behind the letter that's being written. Email. Obviously, it's the most easiest way that people are communicating with everyone, expressing their concerns. And again, be very frank about your concerns. Stay away from long letters. As a former staffer, I can tell you, if I got a 2-page letter, I'm not going to remember everything that was said. If I got a half a page letter that was very direct, talked about who it was that I'm concerned about, you could remember those a lot more than you'll remember a 2-page letter. Set up of office visits, and then obviously getting community input. Social media, literally that's the fastest way right now to connect with elected officials. Whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, or other platforms. If there are elected officials out there that you know personally and you're following them, that's great. If there's others you don't really know that well, just to see what their party politics are. Right now, again, it's some trying times. It's hard to want to follow someone you don't see eye to eye with on their views. But you got to remember, these people still vote on issues that impact our community. The media, probably one of the best ways you can get attention of an elected official is if you're having an event. There's a concern, there's a press release. We've seen it on the news, or we've experienced it in person. Hosting an event, having a press release, having a press conference is a great way to generate information and interest for elected officials, or you invite them to that press release. And host the local events like a legislative luncheon. I've hosted over the 25 years at San Andreas. We used to do a legislative breakfast. We would do 2 of them in 2 different counties. About 12 years ago, we combined them to one. So I've hosted over 40 legislative events, lunches. Now we call them a lunch. It used to be a breakfast. And it's very effective. You get your elected officials there. They get to hear what your concerns are, or they hear from the families that are going to be speaking. These are photos from last year's legislative luncheon. This young man, Evan, he was my co-MC. Evan is a young man on the spectrum. That's his mom, Vivian, great advocate. And so I had invited Evan to be my co-MC. He introduced my elected officials. Here we had Senator Cortese, Assemblymember Cholera, former Board of Supervisor Joe Samidian, Vice Mayor Kamei, Soledad Mayor Anna, and then the Executive Director of San Andreas. And then these 3 individuals are individuals that are served, Cole, Matt, and Martin. I try to always, if not always host our events with someone speaking who is an individual served. Um, I would never host an event, talk about our community and not even have our community represented. And so individuals that are served are always part of the program. And coming up, this is Assemblymember Ash Carler. If anybody knows him, he loves to take selfies, and that's why that photo was done that way. Our upcoming legislative luncheon is actually sold out. Vice Mayor Foley, Assemblymember Patrick Ahern, Senator Cortese. I'll have a video message from Congressman Panetta, Board President Otto Lee, and then Councilmember Ben Doon. Again, developing relationships with your elected officials and then inviting them to speak is important so that your constituency, your families, your stakeholders can hear from them directly. Office visits. Here's how it happens, at least on my end. And this is my advice. I'm sure everyone has their own ways. Like I said, I've had over hundreds and hundreds of meetings with elected officials at all different levels. Reach out to the scheduler. The scheduler is going to be the best friend. That's the person that schedules the meeting for the elected official. The most effective way when visiting elected official offices and their staff, discussion should be cohesive while keeping focus on topics being shared. The most effective office visits are those that include personal stories. Talking points are a vital tool to help bring issues to personal messages to the offices. No one should stray from talking points. Share photos of loved ones and leave letters from individuals who could not make the meeting. It is very possible that an elected official and or their staff have never met an individual with a developmental disability, and that's the fact. In many cases, you might have an elected official who has a staff person working on policy issues for disability issues, and then in 2 years, they're gone. Now they hire a new person, and that new person has no clue or has had no experience on disability issues, which is why constant meetings with these elected officials and their staff are important. Newly elected officials who have no clue or maybe have never met an individual with a disability. You want to get in there. You want to be in their presence to let them know. These are the individuals we serve. This is an individual with autism, cerebral palsy, a differing ability. And in many cases, and I've seen it, they've never met someone. Advocacy should not end when you leave an elected official's office. It should be in the beginning of your advocacy career and relationship with elected official and their staff. Follow up with each office with a thank you. This was a meeting a while back. In California, there's an association called Association of Regional Center Agencies. They're the actual lobby group in Sacramento that keep an eye on all the legislative issues and budget issues in California. And they host an event every year called Grassroots Day, where they invite all the regional centers, and the regional centers send representatives. This was a briefing that I was having with my group prior to the meetings, preparing them, going through the talking points, and really making sure everybody was on the same page. The messaging that we had was the same message that all the other regional centers had. Now, here's what's important when you're going into a meeting. This is really what the main part I really want to emphasize on with the time that I have left. Select a group lead. If you're going into a meeting with a group, have a person be the lead. The group should ask itself, why are we making the office visits? The group should be well organized, prepared, and mindful of topics to be discussed to get the message across. What's the ask? What's pending legislation? What the talking points, and are there budget issues? And then leave written information about your concerns at each office. It's important to have a group lead to help manage and keep the meeting moving on. Groups should know one another and be polite during the meetings. The group should have material to leave after the meeting. I mentioned that. The group should have letters and photos of loved ones. Do not argue or challenge legislators and their staff on issues during a legislative office visit. Be courteous, professional, and polite during every meeting. I can't emphasize enough how you want to build these relationships with these elected officials and their staff. The last thing they want is somebody in their office yelling at them. chances are you're not going to be invited back. Or when you try to schedule a meeting, they're going to remember you and say, you know what, sorry, but we're not available. It does happen. Um, if you've been in presentations or people told you that get in their face approach, again, I don't agree with it. It doesn't work. There are moments when it has to happen. But if you're trying to schedule a legislative meeting to talk about a certain issue, the last thing you want to do is um, argue with someone or make yourself combative during a meeting. The group lead should find out at the beginning of the meeting how much time is there while managing equal time for others to share. Office visits will have timelines, so manage it wisely. At the beginning of the meeting, how much time do we have? Make introductions. Make an ask of the issues or bills the group is there supporting. Leave time for Q&A. However, it doesn't permit to ask to schedule a follow-up meeting. Find out who works on policy issues related to disability issues and follow up with that staff person. This was a group last year that when we went to Sacramento, and the coalition of individuals, we have a parent, we have a provider, we have two individuals served, three individuals served, a sibling, a mom, and then two staffers, and then three individuals served. This was actually a meeting with the Department of Finance. Of all the regional centers, we were asked to meet with the Department of Finance. A gentleman sitting way in the back, his name is Rick Rollins. Some of you may know who he is. If you don't, look him up. The way I describe Rick is he's the Michael Jordan of our service system in California. Rick Rollins is a bright man, and he's also a parent of a young man on the spectrum. This was a meeting with Senator Becker. Sometimes when you're going into meetings, you may not even have an office to sit in. They may say, take you in the hallway. You want to be prepared for any kind of meeting to come up, whether it's in the hallway, whether it's in the office, moving furniture. It happens. And so as a group, before you go into a meeting, you always want to be prepared for every potential element. Who should be in those meetings? Parents, individuals with disabilities, siblings, grandparents, friends, community groups, stakeholders, service providers, and staff who work with individuals. I would not recommend taking 20 people into a meeting. I would not recommend taking 10 people into a meeting. You really need about 5 to 6 people in a meeting to have an effective meeting. If you're only going to have 15 to 30 minutes, 5 or 6 people is more than enough to get the point across. If you have a group that wants to go in with 20 people, I guarantee you it's not going to be an effective meeting. Now, if it happens to be in a larger room and the elected official is just going to talk, then of course you want as many people in that as possible. However, if you're going into a meeting and you're going to discuss issues related to a certain bill or budget issue, and you only have 15 minutes or 30 minutes, you do not need 20 or 10 people in that meeting. 5 or 6 is the most. And I share that out of experience in the meetings that I've been in. Meeting with your elected representative and their staff, effective way to communicate your message. Meetings can be held at someone's home or school or at a program in the community or at an elected official's office. Meeting with your elected representatives provides the opportunity to connect at a personal level. Giving tours of your programs to elected officials and their staff can be an invaluable way of getting them to know who you are. Never hesitate to invite an elected official or their staff to visit your program. I highly recommend if you run a program or if you're part of a program, invite them, have them come over. Most often, if it's a state representative or a federal representative, they're out of their offices Monday through Thursday. They usually check in on Fridays. Plan it on a Friday when they're in town and get it on the schedule way in advance. The do's and don'ts, I'm going to try to go through this real quick. Time should be shared equally, but if someone goes on and on, the group lead needs to interrupt that person. I've seen it happen where someone goes on their own tangent or they go in with their own, their own mission. And unfortunately, that's unfair to everyone else. You're supposed to be there as a group. You're supposed to be there as have one voice. And so you want to avoid one person really hijacking your meeting. And that's why you want to meet before. You want to know who the people are that you're going into a meeting with. My rule is I would never go into a legislative meeting with a senator or an assembly member with someone I did not know. I will make sure that we meet before as a group. If somebody's recommending, hey, this is someone you should meet, let's meet before, let's talk. Do you agree with how we want to go into this meeting? Yes, yes. Okay, then, be part of the group. But never walk into a meeting with someone you've never met. My advice. It is important that the group lead know when to intervene if someone in the group keeps others from speaking. It does happen. Those of you who have been part of these meetings, you know that there could be someone who just goes on and on. And again, it's unfair to those that are in the room, especially if you only have 15 minutes. You really have to intervene with that person. And then lastly, obviously be mindful of others. You really want to be respectful of others' times, especially if they went out of their way to drive to the Capitol or wherever it was to meet with these elected officials. Here's a meeting that we had. We actually had it in their walkway because they didn't have any office space. This is a meeting with Assemblymember Addis, Senator Laird. It's helpful to begin from personal experience. How has or will your family be directly impacted by budget cuts or by the passage of particular bills or a budget? Share how much an individual with a disability, mental illness, or physical disability can benefit by having inclusive programs and services in the community. What I always try to do in everything we do is inclusive. We want to always emphasize the message of inclusiveness, because really that's what the individuals that we serve deserve. They deserve to be included in everything that's going on in the community. Real quick, I'm keeping track of my time. In about 4 minutes, I'll open it up for questions, just in case some of you want to ask me something. I'm going to pass. I'm going to go through all this. After a meeting, say thank you. Leave written material for the legislator. Always invite legislators and their staff to community events supporting individuals with disabilities and have them participate if possible. I literally just got an email yesterday from my sold out legislative luncheon. I got an email from a congressional office staffer who said he was trying to register, but it was sold out. And I said, no problem, I'll add you. I always leave extra space at my events just in case. And so you never know when you're going to get that call or that email or that letter saying, hey, we want to attend your event, which is why going back to my 3 key points of building relationships is so important. Here was a meeting that we had with an assembly member staffer. Again, if you're thinking you're going into a meeting with the legislator, don't be disappointed if you don't. Just make sure that you're concise with your messaging, that you have everyone there the opportunity to share, and that there's a balance. You have a parent, you have an individual served, you have a provider, you have a sibling. So that way every angle of the issues that you're talking about are heard. I wouldn't go into a room with just parents. I wouldn't go in a room with just individuals served. I wouldn't go into a room with just providers. When you got a cohesive voice with a balance of backgrounds, it really gives you a better messaging when you're meeting with elected officials. This is the meeting that we had with Speaker Rivas and then Ash. And coalition building. This is a poster I put together years ago. Whenever I do events, I invite everyone. And again, it's about building relationships, building coalitions, and bringing others on board with what you want to do. This is my wall just last week of all the different events that we're part of. Again, it's about building relationships, building coalitions, and you don't want to assume that someone knows who you are or what your group is about. Call someone and say, can we be part of your tabling, or offer it up to those organizations that are interested in being part of your event. Never, ever, ever exclude anyone. Obviously, there's moments when you have to. But really, it's all about building relationships and coalitions, because when it comes time to meet with those elected officials, you want to have those partnerships in the community that can help you deliver that message as well. This is the last thing I'll share, and then I'll stop because there is more. Every year we host this event, Superhero Summer Festival, where we invite our community elected officials. I'll be hosting 4 this year. And really, it's an opportunity for us to invite our community and the general public to be around individuals that we serve. And again, you're creating an opportunity for elected officials and their staff to be part of something that you're hosting, or at least to have contact with the people that you serve. With that, Devon, I'm going to go ahead and stop. I have more, but I definitely wanted to open it up for questions um, and not run out of my hour time.
We have a few questions in the Q&A I can read to you.
Sure.
Um, Talking about the risk of mass Medicaid cuts, how do we include education of how spidered Medicaid funds are into our entire healthcare system, even if the person themselves does not utilize Medicaid for their own healthcare needs?
So you're talking about how do you recruit someone to advocate even though they may not be receiving the services? Is that?
Correct.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to building those relationships. You may not be the person receiving the service, but you may know someone. For example, you may have an elected official, and this happens all the time. They have a family member with autism or cerebral palsy, and they may or may not be sharing that information. And so you always want to reach out to different groups, coalitions, regardless if they have a person is impacted by the service or not. Creating events, developing relationships. Now they want to be invested in supporting what you do. The next question.
Next question. The world is on fire these days. Which issue do you feel are the critical importance for focused legislative advocacy on federal state legislators?
Yeah, that's a hot button button right now, especially what's going on in Washington. My advice, depending on the district you live in and the representative you have, again, try to try to schedule a meeting in their office behind the scenes, away from the cameras, away from the media, and have a heart-to-heart conversation about your concerns and bring a coalition with you, the 5 to 6 people that I mentioned. And not that you know, you're not doing your job speech. It's more of, look, our families are in need of help. What can you do to support us? We do know that at the federal level, unfortunately, party politics is really driving the driving force in a lot of issues. However, it's also having an impact on those elected officials that maybe changing their mind on how they view things. And that's when they need to hear from those constituents, those family members. I would never go into a meeting saying, hey, I'm a registered Democrat or a registered Republican or an independent. I'm coming in here as an advocate supporting people with disabilities. That would be my entrance into a meeting, regardless of who it is you're meeting with.
What is an example of a typical ask? Is it a yes or no question?
Typical ask, it depends on your region. For example, say you're meeting with a city council member and they're going to vote on an issue regarding property to convert into affordable housing. Okay, so that's the ask. We support this policy. If it's at the federal level, proposed cuts right now to Medicare, Medicaid, the ask is please don't cut. We need our services. People are going to be hurt. The young lady that you saw in the wheelchair in some of the photos, her name's Darcy, an amazing young lady. She's been in a lot of meetings with me. And when she goes into meetings, she tells the legislators point blank, if I don't have my supports, I can't get out of bed. And so you personalize it. You don't want to label it as a Democrat or Republican issue. You want to label it as a human issue. And even though, unfortunately, at the federal level, party politics is really driving what's happening, you got to find a different way to bring that message behind the scenes, as opposed to what's happening out in front of the cameras.
Thank you so much for a wonderful and informative presentation. How can we best track current policy proposals or bills that affects the disability community, developmental disability community?
It really depends on your state. In California, we're very fortunate to have the Latterman Act. This is the Latterman Act. If it wasn't for this act, our service system would not exist. I know that in other states, there's waiting lists up to 15 years, 10 years. We don't have waiting lists now. There are families right now waiting to get a service, but the law prohibits us from having a waiting list. When I started in 1999, this was the Latterman Act. This is it now. That's how much advocacy has gone into making sure that policies are passed to support our population. Depending on where you live, you just have to find out what are the groups out there, what are the coalitions, and really be mindful of those groups that are anti something because they may or may not be the best way to go. For me, TASH, CalTASH, the ARC, ARCA, those have been great advocacy groups that support people with developmental disabilities. Throughout the state of California, there's other groups that do the same thing. May not agree on everything, but at the same time, we're all there supporting the same individuals. School systems, the schools are still the same thing. The regional centers don't always see eye to eye with the schools, but guess what? We're still serving the same individual. And so there has to be a way to have a cohesive dialogue and find out where it is where you're from, the person that asked a question, those groups are. Real quick before I run out of time, this QR code is to, I put out an email every week of all the events that are happening in our catchment area. If you're from California or the Bay Area or from other parts of the country, I encourage you to scan that, log in to my or to receive my MailChimp email. And it's really more about sharing information. And the reason I do it is there are a lot of different groups who may not have direct contact with our community as far as providing a service, but I still share their information so that way others can also see what's going on. Even though our community is receiving a service from a particular organization or funding from us, I still want to let them know, hey, there's other things going on out there. And with those other events, what I try to do is I reach out to those organizers and say, how can I help make your event more inclusive? I've done that 100 times. So that families that we serve, as you know, a lot of times the families don't feel included. I try to make it so that other organizations find a way to make their events inclusive as well.
Okay, let's see, one more question that we have time for.
Sure.
We are going to DC to meet with people tomorrow. I have two questions. What can we do when it is hard to get the meeting, even with the staffers? And my second question, we wanted to request information on how Congress is defining fraud, waste, and abuse. We are going to ask for advocacy to not cut Medicaid.
Hmm.
We do have a video stories and some papers to leave with the staffers. Is this too political to ask for those definitions?
No, it's not. I just wouldn't say I'm coming in as a Democrat or Republican and leaving this information. Now, my advice is call that office as soon as you get off the Zoom call to see if they even have time to meet with you. The last thing you want to do is just walk in and say, I'm here. They may not even have someone to talk to you. I would never walk into an elected official's office and say, can I meet with Senator so-and-so right now? A, they have a schedule. B, the staffers have schedules. Make the phone calls to whoever you're meeting with. If you're a constituent, they're going to meet with you. If you're not a constituent, they can say no. And so really, if you're going there as a group, who's a constituent of what elected official? If they tell you we have 15 minutes at 4 o'clock, take it. Take it, take it, take it. But don't just show up to the Capitol, to those office buildings on, I can't remember the name of the street, but right there across the street from the Capitol and expect them to meet with you. Chances are they're going to turn you away. So really what you want to do right now is make a phone call and say, can we meet? And if they can't, then let them know, hey, I'm just going to stop by to leave some information.
Okay, that is all the time we have for our questions today. I want to thank you for joining us and thank you for our speaker, Francisco. Thank you so much. It was very informative. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. The main question everyone, I guess, wanted to ask is, can they have a copy of your presentation?
Yes, if you,
I
I
mean,
just want to do a quick
I can send it
disclosure.
out to them as well, but we just wanted to know if that's
Yeah.
okay
If
for me to
you
send.
sign up with that QR code, I will get your email and I can email you a PDF copy. Or Devon, if you have it recorded, obviously they can access it that way as well.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And our next webinar is located in the chat for April 10th. And everybody have a great day.
Thank
Thanks.
you all. Thank you for joining me, and thank you, Devon, for asking me and having me to speak. Appreciate it.